Hey, I'm back with Shannon Thomas again. She's been with us before, and Shannon has written a book called Exposing Financial Abuse. Now, the interesting angle about this book is Shannon is a therapist, and she's worked quite a bit with people who have personality disorders, specifically narcissism. In fact, she has another book called Healing from Hidden Abuse, and she's a therapist that I respect quite a bit. And so we're going to be going into the angle that she has about how narcissistic people can actually try to wield their control via the checkbook. And we've talked before about how there's a lot of secrecy and lie and sometimes hidden kind of elements there that's a part of their way of doing the abuse. And so we're going to be adding to some of the comments that she's made before. So Shannon, once again, I want to thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
And I just want you to kind of talk into what you're hoping you can accomplish as you bring this subject out to the general public, and who you're talking to, and what you're wanting them to glean from your writings and the things that you've discovered.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I really believe that this is the right time for us to be talking about financial abuse. There's not a lot out there. There are some nonprofits, there's some advocacy work, but this really needs to start getting as much attention and as kind of an advocacy and awareness campaign as narcissistic abuse has, as domestic violence has, because this is a key component. Some research says there's 99% of abusive relationships have a financial abuse component to it. I think it's closer to that 95 to 99% range. That's huge.
Any way you look at it, that's a lot.
That is huge, whether that's 95% or 99%. We really need to discuss this, because this is what creates traps. This is what creates a lot of the spinning of people not being able to get safe, people not being able to find their footing. And so I'm really excited to have been able to share the survivor stories, that because we had over almost 2,000 different stories that came out. We had about 455 people that participated, and in those 455, they told us multiple stories of different events of financial abuse. So the book is just chock full of those stories, wide ranges of how this is impacting different people on a daily basis.
Now, Shannon would be modest, but I'm going to go ahead and brag on her. She has people in legislatures or in legislative bodies who are talking with her and picking up on the information she has, so that there can actually be some changes in some laws. And so we're talking with somebody here who's having a very good influence in this, both from the financial end of it, of course, but also just speaking into the way that this kind of situation can work its way into people's personal lives in not such a great way. Now, before we get going a little bit further, I do want to let you know that we are going to provide links right below the video to Shannon's books, Exposing Financial Abuse, and then she has another book called Healing from Hidden Abuse. Both of them are excellent. She's a best-selling author. And then we're also going to be including Laura Carranza's book, Ugly Love. She's a survivor of narcissistic relationships. And then for grins, we're going to put in Les Carter's book, When Pleasing You is Killing Me.
Which happens to be one of my favorite books of all time. I have to say that is one of the groundbreaking books for me, to have been able to help other folks, but also Enough About You, Let's Talk About Me. That was the book that started me on my path.
There you go.
It really was. So
okay.
Thank you.
Good. And then if you want to subscribe to our channel, we'd love for you to do that, so that we can send you notifications when more videos come up. Now, Shannon, let's talk about a key theme that you highlight in the book, and that's the theme of sabotaging. When you're the abuser, what's going on in that sabotage direction?
You bet. That is a really important component, because what we've had is that we've talked about the lies, we've talked about the threats, we've talked about the basic needs, we've talked about crimes that are done within this form of abuse. Sabotaging happens when the survivor is trying to find their footing, trying to figure out how do they gain some control over their finances, or how do they not have their finances drained by the financial abuser, because there's both control and there's also more of a draining that can happen. They happen both ways within these situations, but sabotaging can be, we had stories of Mary in the book, and she wanted to try to get back to work, or really needed to work, as she was the primary breadwinner. And when she would leave, her husband would create a situation where her young children were very afraid to be with him. Not so much that it was abusive, where family services would be involved, but the children would be crying, the children would be upset that she was leaving, because he, as we know, narcissists don't have very good parenting skills overall, because it really requires empathy and being able to address what does that child need in the moment. So Mary would try to go to work and get, call in to see how things were doing, and there would be a house full of young children screaming and being upset, not where they were in danger at the moment, but really poor parenting. So she had a hard time maintaining employment, because it's very hard to be at work and to not know for sure that your children are well cared for.
So that's there's a real passive aggressive element to that too. And
Yes.
Another word that seems to run parallel to sabotage is conniving. So you were dealing with conniving people. And if you're a normal person, and I often tell people who are trying to live with that narcissist, your biggest problem is you think like a normal person.
Yes.
You don't think in conniving terms. And so that becomes the advantage the narcissist has.
100% agree. And I always say that, because survivors will ask, well, why does that person behave that way? Why? And I say it's not really important for us to understand the why, but what we do know is that if my life is all about me, then I'm going to behave in a certain way that it doesn't matter what the other person says. It doesn't matter what the other person wants. That conniving comes out, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters to a narcissist is their way.
Okay. So you're the person who is discovering that there's been all of this financial mismanagement. What happens that takes that individual to a turning point to where they start addressing this in a very different kind of way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sometimes it's the survivor might have control over the finances, and the other person is draining them by not working. The other person is, taking money out of the account or moving money around. Sometimes it is an overt control of the finances, and other times it could be that it's being bled out. So there's like a hemorrhaging of money going on. And so, a turning point, like in the book, we had Eliza, who she was having a baby and spoke with her partner, and the partner said, I don't know why I need to get a job. I mean, just flat out. And they do tell on themselves if we listen. A lot of narcissists will tell you exactly what they think, but sometimes we laugh it off and think they must be joking, and they're not. So if we really hear it, and so for her, it was the moment where she wanted to be able to be home and have adequate time to be able to recover from a C-section, from a major abdominal surgery, and having a baby. And the partner said, well, I don't know why I need to go get a job. So she ended up having to go back to work much earlier than probably was even healthy for her, because her partner clearly did not feel it was part of his life duty to support her.
Now, I'm assuming that when you start having those light bulb aha moments, that becomes that turning point. Then I know in your book you mentioned how people can start taking back their lives by going into what you refer to as the protection phase, or the protection theme that's there. Talk about that and how we can go there.
You bet. And I think that one of the biggest themes for protection was we had to stop the access to money. That is vast majority of what survivors ended up needing to get to, and it happened slowly. I have to tell you, this sort of recovery is probably one of the slowest processes out of a psychologically or an emotionally abusive relationship. Financial abuse can last, and the devastation can last, as far as to credit, way longer than the relationship even. That my relationship may be way down the road, but survivors are still digging out of the debt.
Still paying for it years down there. Boy, I've heard some stories on that one too.
Yeah, so we have to really work with those triggers of every month getting bills that they did not create. And so the rebuilding, or the protection actually, was where having to have, payroll, rather than payroll going into a joint account where the abuser had access to it, putting it into a separate account. So that they could manage their money better. Protection is putting those fraud protection alerts on their accounts. That was one of the biggest things that survivors had talked about, what they did. It's basically the theme of how do I stop the hemorrhaging?
So you have all the lies, the secrecy, the sabotaging. Then you have that turning point where there's the aha moment, and you start going into the protection mode. And I strongly suspect that you would agree that many times people don't take that next step to protection. And then you also talk about rebuilding because they think it's just going to be so uncomfortable. And so they just keep kicking the can down the road. But you talk about how there is actually a rebuilding process. And so that's there is hope, even though it may take some time.
Yeah, there's definitely hope. And what I tell a lot of survivors is, celebrate the small steps. This is a marathon. Once someone has, realized that they've been in a financially exploitive relationship, it's going to take time. And so we have to celebrate every day, every bill that gets paid, every month that the survivor is rebuilding and making those choices to protect their finances or not take responsibility. Some of the stories, it's not that they left the relationship, it's that they set some really clear boundaries and they stuck with it. And because it was a lower level toxic person, because there is a spectrum to toxicity, that lower level person was sort of willing to not continue to be financially exploitive. Not all of them will. Not all survivors or abusers will work with the person, but some will. And so it's really having to just celebrate the small moments of victory.
One last thing. I know that when you're the person who's trying to recover, you can feel very embarrassed by having to admit to family and friends that all of this has been going on, because somebody can say, well, how did you let this happen?
Absolutely.
But I guess there just has to be this sense of honesty and recognition. Sometimes you don't even know what you don't know, and you have to go ahead and just be open and honest and avail yourself to the help that folks can offer while you're on that road towards rebuilding.
You bet. And it's being honest with the right people is really important. We end up wanting to make sure that if we are going to tell somebody about this, that they're not going to do a lot of shame or blame. I mean, even in the story in the book, Michelle, she didn't know what was going on until her spouse was arrested. Really, he had created such a facade and a billboard that she did not know, because she didn't really get the mail, and there was just a lot of things that he would do that she wouldn't even notice that he was doing until he was arrested. And when he was, that's when she was able to get access to everything. And it truly is a con. I think that's one thing survivors need to recognize, is that if they've met paths, unfortunately, with a psychological abuser, they have met a con artist. So it's having to step back and not blame themselves, but recognize, then be honest with, I met somebody who gave me a completely different persona than what reality was.
Now, as a way of closing with hope, I have a phrase that I like to throw at folks, and that is, crisis creates growth if you let it. And there's a quote that you have right at the tail end of your book that says, I am my own responsibility. And so really what I'm hearing you say is, as all of this is unfolding, that person needs to get back to their basics and reclaim who they are, and then live according to their principles, as opposed to filtering it through that abuser.
Yeah, very well said. That's exactly what it is. And being able to just be honest and not do the self-blame. I am where I am, and where am I going to go forward?
It's part of the journey.
Yes, it is.
And we're all in it together.
Yes,
Shannon
we are.
Thomas, I am so pleased that you've been with us. And for those of you who respect Shannon, and I know you're going to be able to glean a lot as you get into her books, just know we're going to have her back for more, because this person's a wealth of information.
Thank you.
So, Shannon, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.